Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Synthetic Native podcast. I'm here with a really special guest, Monika Kedrova. Hopefully, I said that right. She's a software engineer at Archilogic in Zurich, core contributor to 3D.io, and works on or with WebXR. I guess it's WebXR now, but what you might think of as WebVR, WebAR technology. Does that kind of how would you pitch yourself?
Yes,
Monika?
that was a very nice introduction. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So, yes, I'm a software engineer at Archilogic, and 3D.io is an open source project that we are now working on. I have been recently involved in WebVR and WebXR. Now, what is WebXR? And I guess we'll get to that in a bit. It was a bit of an unexpected turn of events for me, so to say, because I have not been working on anything front-endy, so to say, for much of my time at Archilogic. But recently with the growth of WebVR and with the increased interest, I started getting a bit more involved with the community, going to conferences, speaking about WebVR. And most recently, it's already been 2 months, I guess. At the end of October, I participated at the W3C WebVR Content Creators Workshop that was in Brussels, which was very cool. And there we talked about the future of WebVR. And basically there I learned that WebVR is no longer going to stay WebVR, since we now also have AR-enabled mobile devices and so on. So the new specification is now called WebXR, and the X stands for whatever you wish. The X can stand for A for augmented reality, M mixed reality, or any sort of word you wish, mixed. So yeah.
Cool. I like that it's WebXR now because as somebody who talks about these things often, it gets a little annoying to switch between VR, MR, AR, especially because they all sort of exist on a spectrum, and a good name for that spectrum, I feel like, is XR.
Yes,
I guess you could just say the virtual reality spectrum as well.
I guess so, yes. And I feel the same way because, I guess even if you asked two people what they consider being AR versus MR versus VR and so on, it's of course there's a variety of different, I'd say functionality or different things you could imagine and imagine when you hear those words, but I don't really see them as disconnected, right? It's, as you said, it's right. A spectrum. So I really also like that now we move to WebXR.
Yeah. So how would you actually, because I made a video on this before, but I'm not sure how would you define the difference between VR and AR, and then MR is sort of a special case, I feel like.
Yes, actually, I've been also thinking about it a bit, especially when it comes to MR versus AR. And I have not really come up with a clear-cut, solution or an answer. When it comes to VR itself and AR, okay, you can see that there's a difference between augmented reality, which also shows you the real world, right? So you are not completely immersed into the virtual experience, but you get the real world, which is enhanced. So this is augmented. You get more information or more content. But when it comes to mixed reality, actually that leaves me a bit puzzled still. Even after testing out the Windows or what is it, Microsoft mixed reality headsets.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't have an answer for that.
I think the way that I tried to define it before was MR was, it's basically AR, but where they're trying to tie the objects very closely to real world physical objects, like adding a menu to your refrigerator on top of it is kind of like
Right.
sort of what I was thinking. I don't even know if that's truly accurate though. I haven't tried the Windows headsets, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm also not sure about it, but also with just AR, what you just described is something that where I see it going, anyways. You know, with I see all these ideas for applications, for AR applications where you see the real world, and then you have an application which, for example, when you look at some books in a bookshelf, it can get you information about them and so on, you know, and kind of live gives you basically feedback on what's in the real world, or as you said, you know, maybe even operating the fridge, or you know, getting menus
Something like that.
that allow you to interact with the real world. Yeah, so I really don't see these two as disconnected.
Right, that makes sense. Let's talk about Archilogic. Can you tell us what Archilogic does and what you do for them?
Yes, for sure. So Archilogic is a startup. I guess still a startup. We've been around for about 4 years as well. Yes, 4 years now. It's going to be 4 years in March. I was one of the first employees in 2014, and at the beginning there was this great idea of making a web application that would be a 3D editor for architecture. So basically, like what you have with AutoCAD, for example, or other professional software, which is very complicated, very bulky, and it's a normally a desktop application, but having basically the same thing on the web in 3D. And it was a very cool idea. And I remember the first time seeing a demo of the app, which already at the time as a prototype, it was, you could already see what it was doing. Sort of, you know, you could see the room, the apartment, you could see it rotate, you could add furniture and so on. So at that time already it looked pretty good, even though it wasn't a product, it was still a prototype. But I remember looking at it and having had zero experience with 3D or at the time VR was somewhere completely different for me as well. It was not even on the top of my mind. So seeing that for me, it was amazing. And I thought, whoa, this is so cool. I have no idea how it works, but it's so cool. So that was when I joined Archilogic. And since we are still a small company, and especially at the beginning where there were just a few of us, people would work on multiple things. I guess you know how it is in startups, you know, whether it's just 4 employees or something like that. You really get to work on everything. So at first I was fixing front end bugs, then I moved on to the back end and databases, then, you know, setting up servers and so on, infrastructure. And in the end, I ended up being more focused on the back end. I've been working on the web server for the past couple of years. So adding functionality, making it better, more stable, able to withstand all the load of all the users that we have now, right? And at a certain point, when we saw that the visual quality of what we were showing of the architecture was not that great, we decided to start creating light maps. And I don't know who listens to these podcasts and what the experience there is. So basically what we decided to do was take the 3D model, export it into a 3D editing program where we would basically run physical simulation of light which then creates a texture of where the light would land with certain light settings. And then we would use these textures on top of our 3D model to make them look more realistic, as if there's, real light. So I worked on implementing that and basically writing Blender scripts to automate this process, which we at the time only had done manually. So we had an artist sit down, and have this big model and manually working on all the details, trying to make it look beautiful, and then using all sorts of different light settings to make it look really nice. So we managed to automate that, and then we hired another great colleague of mine who has been working on that since then, and now it looks quite amazing. And last year in the summer, we decided to move from more of like a project-based company, or just having this editor as a product, towards a more platform-oriented. So as I said, we started with the 3D.io, which is which is a set of tools to allow easy integration of 3D models of apartments or furniture into your websites and VR scenes and so on. So we have moved also more towards creating scenes that work in your regular browser, but also can be directly used in a VR headset.
Right. I just have a quick comment. I was recently on the hunt for an apartment, and I noticed this time around, I guess maybe the last time around, I just didn't. I think I like literally chose the first apartment that I looked at, so it wasn't like I didn't shop around very much. But at least this time around, there was a really like an emphasis on well, at least a lot of places had like 3D models that you could kind of walk through. Although the engines behind each of them sometimes seemed to vary a little bit, and like the stuff that they were wrapped in. But I guess I wouldn't be surprised if I actually used Archilogic's technology while I was like apartment hunting. So that's pretty cool.
It's very easily possible, because yes, of course, we are not the only company working on something like this, because especially recently there has been quite a bit of demand for 3D models of apartments and buildings and so on. So we have had customers who are real estate developers. We have customers that are property portals all around the world. And there are certain areas in the world where it's a lot more popular than in others. So, for example, Australia seems to be quite big. Yeah, I've also started noticing this, and at a certain point in the past, you would get these 360-degree walkthroughs, sort of, that weren't continuous. But I don't know if you remember those, where you could like click somewhere in the apartment and would show you a 360 picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was moved to that. Then last year, at a certain point, or a few years ago, the Matterport became quite a big thing with the 3D scans of properties.
Right.
Yeah, where they would basically come into the house with fancy equipment and scan it, and that creates a lot more, I guess, also a lot more realistic models, especially of the interiors, where you have different materials and different textures and so on. But yeah, and right now with what we have, you may have also seen Archilogic and not known that it's Archilogic or that it's 3D.io, because we have made A-frame components. So you can use all our models in your A-frame scene in one line of code. Yeah, so we have a JavaScript library that basically extends A-frame. So you have a component for the whole scene, or for just a piece of furniture, or you can also upload your own 3D models with us and then use them in our A-frame. Use our A-frame components to bring them back into A-frame. If you, for example, have a model in a certain format and you don't know how to bring it to the web, so we also do these conversions. between different formats.
Okay, let me see if I can. Let me test my understanding of sort of 3D.io and Archilogic. Let's say I work for, I don't know, some sort of real estate company as a software developer, and I want to build like a apartment viewer or property viewer where you can walk through the floor plans or just look at them from above and kind of get like a more 3D view of the apartment. Would I use Archilogic once I've built sort of the outer engine or the outer viewer in A-frame, and then I sort of plug Archilogic or 3D.io in, or how does that work?
Yes, so with 3D.io, that's exactly what you would do. You would create your website and then put an A scene in, and then in just one line add in a 3D.io scene with a basically an ID that you get when you get your floor plan converted. So we do these conversions as well, right? You have a floor plan and then you get your model created, and that's basically what you can do right now. What we had before and what still some people use, I think, is an iframe using our own editor, like our own engine, in which you can view and edit. We're also working on a new viewer altogether that's a lot faster, and that's very exciting. We've seen about 50% performance improvements, which is quite a thing, especially for big models. Yeah, but that's basically what you would do.
Okay. And so I have a floor plan. How do I build the actual room models?
So we have an API through which you can just send us a model, or you can upload send us the floor plan, or you can upload your floor plan on our website, and within approximately a day you get your 3D model back, and you can already view it on Archilogic website, and once you have it, you can embed it anywhere you wish.
Okay, and is this the part where I pay Archilogic, or when do I actually give you guys my hard-earned dollars or euros, as it were?
Yes, it depends on how much of this you want to do, right? So we have a pretty generous offering in the free tier, so you can test it out, play around. You get a couple of model conversions for free. I think it's you get a few conversions for free, as in 2D floor plan to 3D model. You can try out the light baking as well. That's also you can also use it as an API. So or even on your website, you could theoretically create your own 3D editor, sort of also using Archilogic APIs. So the number of calls you can make per month is even for free is, I think, enough for testing and for checking out whether you like it or how it works. So, which is pretty cool, because if you're just working on something as a hobbyist, just for fun, you don't really want to pay, right? I mean, you still have to sort of sign up, because even if you want to make some API calls, you need to use your API key, for which you sign up. But you don't have to, use a credit card on it or anything until you decided, okay, I want to use this for my business.
Okay, and so I guess like web developer at a real estate company, you'd need at least like probably a one web developer to interface with Archilogic, upload the assets, the relevant assets, and then kind of build those together back on the client's web page, something like that.
I'm not entirely sure what you.
Like what I'm saying is are non-technical people able to kind of use Archilogic to build something that they can drop into like an HTML document, or
Yes.
do they is okay?
Yes, so it's aimed at people who are not very technically skilled. So obviously, when you just have a person who knows some HTML and CSS and is able to, add a few HTML tags or A-frame components, they can already make a lot of use of Archilogic. If you want to create a fancy website making API calls and so on, you need somebody who is more skilled in programming in JavaScript, for example, and using also the library for that, but it's definitely not a prerequisite. We also have App Creator, which is a really cool tool that is very visual, where you can just drag and drop stuff and drag and drop components. And that's exactly for completely non-technical people, right? Like you see your model and you want to change things, you want to add features and so on. You drag and drop, and then you have the code generated next to it. So if you want to see what it would look like, if you wanted to put it into take it as a HTML and put it somewhere on your page, you get it from there as well. And that's also for free.
Okay, let's talk about. I had a guy named Simon Manning on the podcast the other day. As of us recording right now, I don't think it's actually gone up, but it will go up very soon. He runs a company called Bevel, based here out of Seattle, and they do something. I hope they're not. I don't know if they're a competitor to you. I don't think so, but they do. He mentioned a scenario that I thought was interesting, which is basically hospitals spend a lot of money to construct basically cardboard or plywood versions of their floors inside of warehouses, and it's like very expensive, very, very time consuming. And one way to remedy that is to build, obviously inside of VR, and then just put on a headset. For obvious reasons, that saves a lot of time and money. Does Archilogic help solve this problem as well?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we do. And I'm now when you're describing the specific issue, I actually think we may have already also had similar projects with a couple of customers that came up to us and said, "Hey, we have this workflow, and we have this and that, and keep all our data in different places. And it would be amazing to have it all integrated in a 3D model, so that, for example, when you need servicing of a building or something, you already see in the 3D model that, hey, here is a place that needs some servicing, or here is how this works, or having a bit more also information about the building, so not just plain 3D model that you would think of as something you have in The Sims, for example, but having more information in there, also being able to also use it in the VR or yeah,
like metadata
yeah,
sort of.
exactly, having like metadata or also, I mean, you could very easily also connect it to any sort of applications that you already have running, for example, what are they called, smart buildings, IoT, that sort of thing. That's also a very very real possibility.
So have you, in your experience, are people still very much kind of just using the browser, keyboard and mouse to interact with these applications, or are people actually starting to really put on headsets to interact with deployed Archilogic applications?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of uses at things like conferences, and professional events, where these companies can create any sort of model they want of, for example, unbuilt property, and then bring in a high-end device such as, I don't know, HTC Vive or Oculus or whatever, bring in their big computer, set it up, and have their customers or partners or whoever come in and try things out. When it comes to this sort of day-to-day use, I have not seen that much of it yet, especially using things like cardboard or Daydream. I don't see people using it as much anymore. I'm thinking that maybe with these more augmented reality headsets, it's going to be maybe more popular, because you could also overlay information over the space you have, that you might have a 3D model of the space you're in, or of a completely different space. And yeah, I don't know, I'm just now thinking of all the possibilities. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's fine. So that kind of brings us to WebXR in general, and how it kind, maybe this is part of the key to driving adoption of VR in general, right? Because it offers that option of like sort of easily viewing something inside of a browser, or optionally putting on a headset and having a more immersive experience. Is that how you see it? Why do you think it's exciting for users?
I think it's extremely exciting because you are able to create content in one place, which is basically a web application, and you are able to distribute it across so many different devices. As you said, a lot of people use their desktop computers, but a lot of people also use their just mobile phones. Some people have fancy VR headsets, and they each can use it and get a different feel or a different set of information from whatever you're trying to show them, right? So I think the exciting part really is that you can progressively sort of enhance what you have, and add something extra for when you have like the VR experience. It's also, you see that it's a lot more immersive, right? So when you have some sort of a space that you're in, that's modeled around you, you put a VR headset on, you can explore it in different ways than you do when you just see it on the screen. You have a lot less immersion there. With the AR applications, imagine we made a few demos like this with the AR core last year, and Chromium. So there's also this push for AR on mobile devices. So we got ourselves an S8 for the office and created this small application where a web application in which you could put furniture into your room. So you would have your mobile phone, and you would just say, "Okay, this is my room," and you would get a set of furniture that got recommended to you, and you would see it
Oh, nice.
in AR, right? And I think that's a very beautiful showcase of what you can do, because yes, of course, you can have a model or a picture that you see in your desktop, but it's a completely different experience when you can, come somewhere or just stand outside in the street, take out your phone, and you can already experiment with things. You can see that, oh, this would look, I don't know, this chair would look great in my room. And then you can, we can create an application, for example, where you could be able to buy it directly, right? Or
Yeah.
you could point it at your existing sofa and say, okay, I would like something nicer. And then you get suggestions. And WebXR is exciting because it really allows you to do this, and it allows you to create your application that gives users more chance to interact with the world or with the with the application as they go, depending on the device. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, this is really useful to me because I spend like hours trying to decide small stuff like what blanket should I get, um, what rug should I get, what couch should I get, what bed should I get, all this stuff. So I'm actually like it's been like for a long time looking at VR. There's been the question of like, would I actually use this? And even a lot of the games, there's been like problems with the usability and things like that. But this is an example of something that I think sounds really, really practical. Just overlaying stuff in your apartment or your living space.
yeah, exactly. That's something that everybody can imagine doing, right? Like for a lot of use cases, it seems a bit far fetched, and like, why would I ever want to use that? But these real world scenarios are, I think, a lot more likely to get a bit more following because people see its value. Um, yeah, and when it comes to the interactions and so on, that's a big topic as well. And we also discussed it at the W3C workshop in October, because how do you create interactions in the browser that make the experience good for everyone or for most people, right? And that's a very difficult topic, and WebVR and WebXR has not been around for that long, so it's still at the very very beginning stages, and even just things like data input. So that's not a resolved topic, so to say. It's still work in progress. Like, how do you do input? How do you do navigation? How do you make things such that people find them intuitive? Because even with many new technologies, people are already used to something. People know the keyboard because it's been around for 60 years, or even longer, even before you had typewriters, right? So that's not something that was new. So you could improve it a little, but people were still used to it. But when you have a VR headset, it's completely different. And you get some controllers that people might be maybe familiar with. But yeah, how do you create the experience that's good for everyone so that, people don't leave, as you said, I don't even know what to do here, what to do with this. So then
Right.
you just try it out and say, okay, this is useless, and you put it away.
Yeah. So on that note, what other, like, first of all, do you own a Rift or a Vive or anything like that?
I don't have any at home. I just have a couple of cardboards. We have Vive at the office and a Daydream, and so on. So whenever I feel like playing, I just use the one at the office.
Okay.
Also at home, I don't have much space. That's one of the limitations, because with these with these with these devices that don't have inside-out tracking, you really need a lot of space, right? And I just don't have that.
Yeah.
So
No, I'm with you. I'm with you.
yeah, if I ever get a big house, with a big room where I have at least 2 by 2 meters of empty space, then yeah, that would be fantastic. But unfortunately, I don't have that right now.
Yeah, for me to do not WebXR, just VR right now for my Oculus, I have to like push my couch out of the way and like make a lot of space, and it's a mess. So I don't know if devices like Magic Leap are going to solve that problem. That would be cool.
Mhm.
Are there any other? Is there any other technology that you're excited about, like that's coming up? I guess Magic Leap would be an example, but it doesn't
Yeah,
even have to be VR.
yeah, I'm really wondering like what that's going to be, because they have been so secretive for the past few years, right? Like I remember the teasers. They had created a website, and you didn't even know what they were going to come up with. And now I see a picture of, okay, this is coming, but you still have no idea also how it compares to other devices. So I don't know when it's going to become available, or who will um, be able to test it out. But um, I'm really wondering how it's going to compare to the HoloLens, for example,
Right.
because that one I was really excited about. I can tell you, like, out of like tech toys that I've tried recently, that one made me so excited, um, because it was, I guess, the first time that I tried a device that didn't feel bulky. That didn't feel like I was, completely enclosed, because I think that's also an issue with VR, that when you're wearing the headset, you're completely isolated from the world around you.
Mhm.
And for me, just wearing the more lightweight headset felt a lot more natural, and it didn't make me feel sick, which is also great, right? Which very often also tends to happen. So, so that has made me very excited. Um,
Yeah, I get simulator sickness pretty badly, so I have to be careful. Have you done any? Have you played any games? Is that how you found out that you get simulator sickness?
well, for me, it was just trying out. Just a couple of years ago, when the first version of Oculus came out, and it was amazing for the time. But also, you put it on, and for me, 10 seconds in, I was feeling nauseous, and so for me, just that was enough. But also, I get it with regular computer games as well. So that's why I don't really play any shooter games, and so because I get motion sickness. Um, but recently, it's gotten better, I feel. Also with the advances in technology, and with the, yeah, I guess you get the higher frame rate, a lower lower latency, better screens. I guess I don't even know what's else there is that has made such a big difference. But more
I think
recently.
those are all factors, definitely.
Yeah. So more recently, it's really not been much of an issue. So I've actually been able to play games in VR now, which is also great. So maybe really when I get a bigger house, I can get some of those VR headsets for home as well and play games finally. When it
Yeah,
gets even a bit
that would
more
be cool.
advanced. Yeah.
There's one other topic I wanted to touch on, and it's kind of completely unrelated, but I think that many young, or I guess not young, anybody tech interested that likes to travel might be interested in knowing your insight on. I guess you have you worked in the U.S. before?
No, I've actually never worked in the US. I only went twice,
Okay.
I think, to visit.
Okay. I think you said before that you lived in or studied in Canada or
Oh,
something.
yes, yes. I studied
Um,
in Canada.
okay. Yeah, my question was just going to be maybe if you have any insight into it. I know you're based in Europe now. What your impression is of doing software work in Europe versus in the US? Or when I say I shouldn't say US, US, Canada, North America.
Mm, um, I'm actually not entirely sure what the differences would be other than sort of the general working conditions that you get, right? Because I know that in the States, it's a lot more intense. You don't really have the mandated vacation policies or things like that, right? What we do. So here it's really more common for people to have a better work-life balance.
Okay.
I have a former classmate from Toronto who was telling me he now works as a software developer, and he was telling me that yeah, I would really like to travel, but I have so few vacation days that I cannot. So he went on one trip in a year that was only 10 days or so, and that was it, which I find a bit unfortunate because travel is great, right? But otherwise, when it comes to software engineering or development in general, I don't see that as I don't actually know whether there are any big differences.
Right.
Right now, the world is it's especially when it comes to software development. You can work remotely. You can work for a company halfway across the world. Now as we are speaking, you are in Seattle. I'm here in Zurich, Switzerland. Um, it's I don't think the differences now are that big, I guess. Maybe they are. I don't know. I just don't have enough
Yeah. I,
information.
I don't think that they're huge. I think that there's stuff like pay differences and yeah, like you said, work life balance and just work culture probably. Uh, Actually, can you? I don't know much about Zurich. Is Zurich kind of a very tech oriented city?
It actually is. That also surprised me the first time I moved here because I didn't know much about Switzerland when I moved here a few years ago, and I always saw Switzerland as the country of banks and chocolate. And I guess
Mhm.
that's what most people kind of think of when they think of Switzerland, and maybe mountains, which yes, the Swiss Alps, it's amazing. Um, but it turns out that there's quite a nice startup culture here as well. There are lots of tech companies doing all sorts of things. There's quite a bit of there are quite a few spin-offs from the ETH here, for example, from the universities, where people work on their PhD and then they turn it into a startup and try to make it big and so on. Um, so yeah, I think it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of also variety in the tech industry because I know in some places you mostly get these sort of agencies that just do very um, very similar stuff, right? Like it's always some sort of just websites or I don't know
Yeah.
things like that. But here I've seen so many different companies working on so many different things from you know your banking financial software to something like what we do, like 3D on the web, to companies working on some sort of agricultural predictive software. I don't even know, bioinformatics, you know all sorts of things. There's such a huge variety. that is also very exciting. You get to meet all these people, and there are a lot of meetups as well here, and for machine learning, for all technologies you could think of. So
That's great. Yeah, it's funny because I'm in Seattle, which is a huge tech city, and there's lots of meetups. But I'm from Houston, Texas. Which have you heard of Houston, Texas?
I have.
Okay, I don't know. So I don't know what its profile is really on the world stage. But it's I was there for the holidays, and there was literally no tech or design meetups going on, and I was just kind of shocked because there's other cities in Texas that are like, Dallas and Austin are actually pretty technically active. And I just was expecting more from my hometown, and it was a little bit sad. Um,
that is surprising, right? When you think about it, because it's a big city, no?
It's huge, but it's so oil and gas focused and like food focused that I don't know, people just don't do a lot of tech and design there, sadly. So just a side note there. Are there any other cities, like I guess Berlin is known for startups, and maybe London as well? Are there any other ones in Europe that are kind of that you think of as like tech focused cities?
Thinking about it, I'm actually not sure. Berlin is big, really, and also a lot of people want to work there as well. So I think that there's also this. Berlin has a certain reputation, and a lot of people want to go there and experience the life there. It's also that it really attracts a lot of I would say young and dynamic people with new ideas who are willing to kind of go all out and experiment, which really helps, right? Compared to some other German cities, Berlin is cheaper, so it's also easier to when you're starting your company and you don't have much in terms of resources. That might be better than, for example, Munich, where you would have a bit more trouble. But
I've heard good things about Munich, though. I like it, not as much as startups, but more established companies,
yes,
I think.
yes, that's the feeling I've gotten as well. That you have the established companies there, and and when it comes to startups, it would be more Berlin. And there's of course a lot going on in London. Yeah, you have the big companies, you have startups, you have all sorts of things going on there.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. It's really interesting to hear about the landscape of technology around the world. I know there's also some really exciting things happening in China and throughout the world. So it's something I like talking about. Well, Monika, I've had a great conversation with you. Do you want to tell the people out there how they can find you? Do you want people to know your Twitter account, or what else? Anything else you'd like to advertise?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if you have some sort of blog as well, or if you put any text with links close to your podcast. I have no idea if you do.
I'll put the description. Like if you mention your Twitter here, I'll put it in the description for.
So I'm on Twitter as Salad Milk Soup. There's a story to it, and I promise I'll make a comic out of it. I've been talking about it for a few months now. And I tweet about conferences I go to, mostly what's going on there, and retweet interesting people's insights into VR, AR, and technology-related news. Check out 3DIO. Check out A-Frame if you want to start with WebVR. You can also look into WebXR specification and the W3C working group, which is also open for anybody to participate in. So if you want to participate in these discussions, you're welcome to. And I guess it would be also nice to put a link there, because they're also very open to input. And now all the specification is in progress, so nothing is set in stone. So now is the time when people who have strong feelings about how things should be when it comes to WebXR have the chance to speak up.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. I might have to check that out. I guess one last thing before we sign off. How was the W3C Is it the symposium or
It was
what's
a
it?
it was a workshop. It was called a
Okay.
workshop, and it was a very intensive 2.5 days in Brussels, where um, I guess around 140 people, representatives of companies working in on VR, AR in all sorts of fields, web browser vendors, all the big companies came there to have discussions about the future of web VR, and it was an amazing experience because there were so many points brought up about what we have now, what we need to work on, what we need to spread awareness about. Right, there were workshops, and there were lots of lightning talks about different small topics. About different topics, and then longer discussions where we had the chance to kind of bounce ideas off of each other. So there were topics from content um, to performance, to audio, to storytelling, to the future, to interactions, accessibility, which is also a topic I didn't think much about before the workshop when it comes to VR. Yeah, so it was definitely an amazing experience. All the videos are online as well, so everybody can also just go on YouTube and check them out. And there's a write up on the GitHub in the GitHub repository um, of the workshop. So yeah,
Yeah,
there's
I wanted to go, but Brussels is a little bit out of the way for me, so
yes,
sadly.
yes. But
Um,
fortunately for us, it was not that much of a hassle to go there. So I felt very lucky that I was able to go there. Um,
yeah,
but I can
that's
imagine coming from the States, it's a bit inconvenient.
it's a little bit of a hassle. But soon. So yeah, thanks so much. I'm really looking forward to see what else Archilogic comes out with, what else you come out with, and of course I follow you on Twitter, and I'm excited to see everything you have to say. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Monika. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to that conversation with Monika Kedrova and I. If you found something interesting, but you wanted some more context, or if you just wanted to let me know what you think, drop a comment on one of the many platforms that we're available on. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, basically every possible platform. We really appreciate your listenership. We've got some really cool stuff coming up. So yeah, thanks again, and we will catch you on the next podcast.